Stand on London Road in Duluth, Minnesota, 3 miles from downtown. The year is 1977. A mansion rises behind iron gates, 39 rooms, red brick catching morning light, Jacobean gables, stone trim, copper details turned green by 70 winters beside Lake Superior, 12 acres of terraced gardens descending toward water. Beautiful, undeniably beautiful. But beauty conceals infrastructure. Grandeur hides cost. And on June 27, 1977, this house became the scene of Minnesota's most notorious double murder. 2 women die in the night, one beaten with a brass candlestick at the bottom of the grand staircase, one suffocated with a satin pillow in her bed. The killer leaves through locked doors. Police find jewelry scattered, a wicker basket missing. And within hours, investigators ask the question that defines every Gilded Age mansion that still stands. Who really paid for this? Not just with money, with labor, with sacrifice, with lives spent maintaining beauty that was never meant to be maintained forever. This is not the story you've heard about Glensheen, not the murder tale told in true crime documentaries, not the architectural triumph celebrated in tour brochures. This is the story of what it cost to build paradise on the edge of Lake Superior, the infrastructure beneath the showpiece rooms, the workers whose names survive only in payroll ledgers, the daughter who believed she was owed that fortune, and the night when the mathematics of inheritance collided with the reality of mortality. How does beauty built on extraction end? Can a house built by mining money survive when the family that created it cannot? The answer lies not in the marble entrance hall or the breakfast room with its green tile walls. It lies in the boiler rooms, the service staircases, the payroll records from 1905, and in the moment when a 25-year-old woman named Velma Pietila, filling in for a sick colleague, walks down a staircase she'll never ascend again. This is what happens when you mistake beauty for immortality, when you confuse a house with an inheritance, when you build without understanding that every grand thing requires not just creation, but endless, exhausting maintenance. Welcome to Glensheen, the Shining Glen, the murder mansion, the museum that preserves everything except the truth about what it really cost. Chapter 1, Before the Fortune, Rochester, New York, June 12, 1853. Chester Adgate Congdon enters a world that offers him nothing, the son of a Methodist minister. English and Dutch ancestry tracing back to Rhode Island Quakers in the 1600s. Respectable lineage. Zero money. The kind of family that believes in hard work, moral living, and the Protestant certainty that success follows virtue. Chester will prove them right and wrong. He attends Syracuse University in 1871. There he meets Clara Hesperia Bannister, another minister's child, from San Francisco, both graduate in 1875. She takes a teaching position at a women's college in Ontario. He studies law under a firm in Syracuse. They write letters, make promises, wait. The waiting stretches longer than either expects. Chester passes the New York bar in 1877. Opens a practice, struggles. In letters to Clara, his frustration bleeds through the formal Victorian prose. "Nothing more than a second-rate lawyer," he writes. "Certainly I should have the good sense to be a cowboy on the plains." But fortune, when it arrives, doesn't announce itself with trumpets. It walks through the door disguised as opportunity. 1879. Chester meets William Bilson, U.S. District Attorney for the state of Minnesota. The two connect immediately. When a position opens, Chester becomes Bilson's assistant. A small pay raise. More importantly, a foothold in Minnesota legal circles. 2 years later, 10 years after they met at Syracuse, Chester borrows several $100s and writes to Clara. They marry on September 29, 1881, in a small ceremony. No grand wedding, no inherited wealth, just 2 people from modest backgrounds betting on each other. St. Paul becomes home. Chester works as assistant U.S. District Attorney until 1884, then launches his own firm. His client list expands. The family grows. By the late 1880s, Chester's practicing law, investing in Western mining stock, acquiring land in Washington's Yakima Valley and along Puget Sound. He's doing well, not wealthy, comfortable. Then Duluth calls. 1892. William Bilson has established a thriving private practice in the booming port city on Lake Superior. He offers Chester a partnership. Chester calculates St. Paul is competitive, established. Duluth is expanding, raw, flush with opportunity, as the Mesa B Iron Range opens to industrial-scale mining. The Congdon family, Chester, Clara, and their growing children relocate north. And there in Duluth, Chester Adgate Congdon will meet the man who transforms him from comfortable lawyer to one of Minnesota's wealthiest citizens. Not through skill alone, not through virtue, through being in the right office when the right man walks through the door. Chapter 2. The ore beneath everything, the Mesabi Iron Range, 120 miles of ore body, the largest deposit of iron on the planet, horizontal, near the surface. Scraped from the earth with steam shovels rather than mined underground like the older Vermilion Range. The Merritt brothers discover it in 1890. Leonidas Merritt leads the expedition. They name it Mesabi, Ojibwe for giant mountain or grandmother of them all. The first mine, Mountain Iron. The ore is 65% pure iron, hematite. The quality is exceptional. The quantity is staggering, and the extraction costs are low. But the Merritt family has vision without capital. They need investors. And in 1892 they find one, Henry Oliver, owner of Pittsburgh's Oliver Steel, the second largest steelmaker in America. Oliver travels to Minnesota for the Republican National Convention in Minneapolis. He's ensuring the party platform includes government protection against foreign steel. After the convention, he visits the Mesabi personally. He likes what he sees. Strikes an agreement with the Merritts to lease ore property. Before leaving Duluth, Oliver decides to hire local legal representation. He goes to William Bilson's office. Bilson is away. On a tight schedule, Oliver reluctantly agrees to meet with Bilson's junior partner. Chester Congdon walks into that meeting as a competent but unremarkable attorney. He walks out as Henry Oliver's Minnesota agent. The two men, both staunch Republicans, both believers in industrial progress, hit it off immediately. According to Chester's grandson Tom Congdon, a firm friendship, both business and personal, was forged between the two and remained throughout their lifetimes. The plan is elegant. Oliver creates the Oliver Mining Company. Congdon serves as the company's agent in Minnesota, leasing and purchasing mining property on the Mesabi. From the mid-1890s through 1901, the Mesabi becomes a battlefield. J.D. Rockefeller, Andrew Carnegie, Henry Oliver, and Chester Congdon fight over ore rights. The competition draws national attention. The fear is that this battle will destabilize the entire American economy. J.P. Morgan steps in. In 1901, Morgan creates United States Steel by buying out Rockefeller, Carnegie, and Oliver Mining's holdings. Chester Congdon owns stock in Oliver Mining. In 6 years, that stock's value increases 555%. Almost overnight, Chester Congdon becomes one of the wealthiest men in Minnesota. Mining lawyer turned mining magnate. The fortune is measured in millions, roughly equivalent to tens of millions today. But Chester is not finished. He partners with Oliver and others, investing in ore property on the western Mesabi. He diversifies. Copper mines in Arizona with the Calumet and Arizona Copper Company at Bisbee. Fruit orchards in Washington's Yakima Valley. His business interests span from Minnesota to Arizona to the Pacific Northwest. Records suggest Chester invests with understanding and strategy. He's not gambling. He's building an empire. And when he looks at his fortune in 1903, when he and Clara have finally achieved his dream of being better off than everybody else, Chester decides it's time to build something permanent, something beautiful, something that will last forever. He chooses a heavily wooded site 3 miles from downtown Duluth, 22 acres along Lake Superior's northern shore, between Tisher Creek and Bent Brook. The land is rugged, dense with birch, maple, spruce. The location seems isolated in 1903, though London Road will eventually bring development. To the west, a cemetery. "I will have quiet neighbors," Clara writes in her diary. Chester and Clara envision a refuge, a family home that will serve generations, a place where their children, 7 of them, including youngest daughter Elizabeth, born in 1894, can live in comfort, surrounded by beauty, insulated from the industrial chaos that funded it all. They hire the best: Clarence H. Johnston, Minnesota's state architect, designer of Summit Avenue mansions, University of Minnesota buildings, churches, prisons. For the landscape, Charles W. Levitt Jr. of New York, who brings young landscape architects Anthony Morell and Arthur Nichols to supervise. For interiors, William A. French, who will design not just decoration, but custom furniture for each room. The house will be named Glensheen, Shining Glen, honoring Chester's ancestral home in the village of Sheen, Surrey, England. Construction begins in July 1905. What Chester Congdon doesn't know, what he cannot know, is that this house, this monument to permanence, will stand for 116 years. But the family that builds it will not survive in it. And on a June morning, 72 years after construction ends, 2 women will die within its walls, murdered in the name of inheritance. The iron beneath the masabi made the fortune. The fortune built the house. But houses, like empires, require more than money to survive. They require sacrifice, maintenance, and the willingness to accept that beauty is never free. Chapter 3. The Machine Behind the Beauty. Stand at the entrance to Glensheen, July 1905. The land is forest. The work begins. First, clearing. Trees fall. Stumps are pulled. The earth is graded to create terraces descending toward Lake Superior. Levitt's design preserves much of the original vegetation: birch, maple, spruce, woven through with new trails, rustic bridges, formal gardens. But preservation requires as much labor as destruction. Johnston's architectural drawings call for a Jacobean Revival mansion, red brick with stone trim, fire-resistant construction, walls of brick, 16-inch thick ceilings, comprised of large hollow tiles, steel frame roof, 39 rooms, 15 bedrooms, 15 fireplaces, 10 bathrooms, a library, parlor, dining room, breakfast room, grand reception room. The scale is extraordinary for the Midwest in 1905. Not Newport, not the Hudson Valley, Duluth, Minnesota, the edge of the frontier. The construction timeline, 3 years, 9 months, from groundbreaking in July 1905 to completion in late 1908. The workforce at peak, estimates suggest dozens of skilled craftsmen and laborers. Payroll ledgers kept at the University of Minnesota Duluth Archives record names. Some survive, many don't. Stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, landscapers. The materials arrive on schedules tighter than passenger trains. Lumber from Oregon, old-growth fir for framing, clear vertical grain. Copper from Montana smelters, rolled in Philadelphia, shipped in coils weighing 600 pounds apiece. Belgian glass arrives in crates of sawdust, stone for the trim, brick for the walls, Indiana limestone, Circassian walnut for interior paneling, mahogany, cypress, fumed oak, enameled birch. William French designs furniture for each room, coordinated with the wood, used in the paneling. The doors throughout the house are made of 2 kinds of wood: oak on the hallway side, the specific wood of each room on the interior side. Wall and ceiling coverings are wool, silk, filled burlap, gold leaf, original stenciling in arts and crafts style, hand-carved details. The cost? $854,000, roughly equivalent to $30 million in today's currency. But money alone doesn't capture what this house requires. Step past the showpiece rooms, past the entrance hall with its carved oak staircase, past the library with its 10,000 volumes, past the dining room and the breakfast room, designed by John Bradstreet of Minneapolis, with green-tiled walls and floors that create the sensation of being outdoors, even when you're inside. Descend into the hidden infrastructure. Deep in the basement, boiler rooms, coal furnaces the size of small factories. The heating system for this house burns tons of coal each winter. The coal arrives by rail, is shoveled into storage, then fed continuously to maintain temperature through Minnesota's brutal cold. Electrical systems. Glensheen is among the first homes in the region with full electricity. The wiring, the fixtures, the maintenance, all require specialists. Plumbing. The house has running hot water throughout. A 60,000-gallon reservoir, fed by water diverted from Tisher Creek, supplies the estate. The reservoir is located between Superior Street and London Road and remains in use today. Pipes run underground through a tunnel from London Road to the mansion, carriage house, boathouse, and gardener's cottage, all utilities concealed, so the landscaping remains unmarred. Service circulation. Staff move through hidden passages. Service staircases, narrow and unadorned, allow servants to circulate without disturbing the family or guests. Fires are lit before dawn. Meals are prepared in industrial-scale kitchens. Laundry facilities operate continuously. The estate at its peak employs up to 30 people. Those who live on site, roughly a dozen, include the gardener, coachman, chauffeur, stableman, cook, and maids. Others, butler, head housekeeper, additional day staff, live off-site. Payroll ledgers from 1922 record names. Some examples: housekeeper, Mrs. Spencer; cook, Mrs. Smith, later Sarah Roper, wife of the butler. Houseman, Mark Roper, brother of the butler, lives in the mansion. Butler, James Roper, lives in the mansion. Chauffeur, John McKay. Laundress, Victoria, lives in the mansion. Downstairs maids, multiple, living in the mansion. Gardener, August Lindholm, later his son, Eric, who continues until 1985. These are not just employees. These are the people without whom Glensheen cannot function, the invisible infrastructure, the parallel world designed to remain out of sight, every fire lit, every meal served, every flower tended, every surface polished. The work never stops. The house is a machine that consumes labor, coal, electricity, water, money. Monthly operational costs in the early years likely reach thousands of dollars, tens of thousands in today's currency. When average workers in 1910 earn less than $500 per year, maintaining Glensheen costs more than most families see in a decade. And here is the central tension. Chester Congdon has the fortune to build this, but can anyone maintain it forever? The house is completed in late November 1908. The family moves in. Chester, Clara, and 7 children finally inhabit the refuge they've designed. Chester believes this place will serve generations, that his children and grandchildren will live here, surrounded by beauty, insulated by wealth. He has 8 years. On November 21st, 1916, Chester Adgate Congdon dies of a pulmonary embolism in St. Paul. He is 63 years old. He spent 8 years in the house he built. Clara continues. The children grow. Some move away. Some remain. The house functions, sustained by the fortune Chester left behind. But sustaining beauty requires more than money. It requires will, adaptation, and the recognition that permanence is not a feature of human creation. It's an aspiration that always, eventually, fails. Chapter 4. The House That Ate Resources. Clara Hesperia Congdon outlives her husband by 34 years. After Chester's death in 1916, Clara remains at Glensheen. The children scatter, marriages, careers, relocations, but the house endures. Maintained by staff, heated through winters, gardens tended, the infrastructure humming beneath the showpiece rooms. Clara dies in 1950. The estate passes to Elizabeth Mannering Congdon, the sixth of 7 children, born April 22, 1894. Elizabeth never marries. In 1932, at nearly 40 years old, she adopts an infant girl she names Marjorie Mannering Congdon. 3 years later, in 1935, she adopts a second daughter, Jennifer Susan Congdon. Elizabeth becomes the keeper of Glensheen, the last family member to live in the mansion her father built. And for 27 years, from 1950 until her death in 1977, she maintains the house. But maintenance is not static. It's erosion you fight daily. Consider the costs: heating, coal deliveries through winter, boiler maintenance, replacement parts for a system designed in 1905. As technology advances, keeping the old infrastructure functional becomes expensive. Staffing. By the 1950s, the era of large household staffs is ending. Wages rise. Social expectations shift. Finding people willing to work as live-in servants becomes difficult. The staff shrinks, but the house doesn't. Structural maintenance. Roofs need replacement. Copper gutters need repair. Mortar between bricks erodes. Wood requires refinishing, paint fades. The house is fire-resistant, but it's not maintenance-resistant. Landscaping. 12 acres of terraced gardens, vegetable gardens, trails. Trees mature and must be pruned or removed. New plantings replace old. The work is continuous. Utilities, water systems, electrical systems, plumbing. Each requires specialists. Each fails over time. The mathematics are brutal. As the house ages, costs rise. As the estate's income remains static or declines, the gap widens. And there's another problem. The fortune Chester Congdon built comes from mining leases and investments. Those generate income. But iron ore doesn't last forever. Markets shift. By mid-century, the economics of Minnesota iron mining are changing. U.S. Steel, the company that made Chester wealthy, faces competition, labor disputes, changing demand. The fortune remains substantial, but it's not infinite. And Glensheen is a machine designed to consume resources without limit. Elizabeth understands this. In 1968, she makes a decision that ensures Glensheen's survival. She donates the estate to the University of Minnesota Duluth. The transfer comes with conditions. Elizabeth retains a life estate, allowing her to live in the house until her death. But after that, the university will own and operate Glensheen. The plan is elegant. The university has resources, institutional continuity, motivation to preserve the estate as a historic landmark. Elizabeth ensures that the house her parents built will survive beyond her lifetime. But first, she must survive. In 1964, at age 70, Elizabeth suffers a massive stroke. She survives but is left partially paralyzed. She requires a wheelchair. Her speech is impaired. She cannot walk. She needs round-the-clock nursing care. A rotating staff of nurses maintains watch, day shifts, night shifts, weekends. The women who care for Elizabeth become her connection to daily life. They feed her, bathe her, manage her medications, read to her, sit with her through long nights. One of those nurses is Velma Pietila. Born April 26, 1911, Velma works as a nurse for decades. She retires a month before June 1977. But when another nurse calls in sick, Velma agrees to fill in for one night, just one shift, June 26, 1977. The night shift at Glensheen. Velma Pietila arrives that evening. Elizabeth Congdon is 83 years old, frail, helpless. The house around them is silent. Staff have gone home. The vast mansion, 39 rooms, empty corridors, the grand staircase, belongs to 2 women in the dark. Somewhere beyond the gates, another person is moving toward Glensheen. His name is Roger Caldwell. He is 43 years old, unemployed, broke, living in a hotel room in Golden, Colorado, because he and his wife can't afford rent. His wife is Marjorie Congdon Leroy Caldwell, Elizabeth's adopted daughter, the woman who stands to inherit $8 million when her mother dies, and Roger Caldwell is coming to Duluth to make sure that happens. Chapter 5. The Mathematics of Inheritance. Marjorie Mannering Congdon. born Jacqueline Barnes, adopted in 1932 by Elizabeth Congdon when Marjorie is an infant. From early childhood, Marjorie is different. Not eccentric, not rebellious, something deeper. In 1949, at age 17, Marjorie is diagnosed as a sociopath. She's institutionalized briefly. The diagnosis doesn't cure her, but it does give the family language for what they observe: lack of empathy, manipulative behavior, reckless spending, inability to maintain relationships. Marjorie marries Dick Leroy, an accountant. They have 7 children together. The marriage lasts 20 years. During that time, Marjorie spends extravagantly. Hundreds of matching outfits for the children for horse shows and ice skating competitions. Dozens of boots and skates. Designer clothing. Bills she doesn't pay. Trusting her mother will cover them. And Elizabeth does. Again and again. The Bank of Mom pays the checks Marjorie bounces. Covers the debts. Sends money. But there's a limit. By the 1970s, Elizabeth's trustees, responsible for managing the fortune after her stroke, begin cutting Marjorie off. No more automatic bailouts. No more unlimited access to family money. Marjorie's marriage to Dick Leroy ends in divorce. Worn down by her overspending, he files. Marjorie moves to Colorado for a fresh start, 1975. She meets Roger Caldwell at a Parents Without Partners meeting. Marjorie is bubbly, vivacious. Roger is malleable, available. They marry quickly. Roger is not a strong man, not violent by nature, not ambitious. He's an out-of-work salesman with no prospects, but he's willing to go along with Marjorie's plans. And Marjorie has plans. She's spent her $1 million trust fund. Gone. The inheritance she was promised, $8 million at her mother's death, is held by trustees who refuse to release it early. Marjorie and Roger are broke, house foreclosed, cars repossessed, living in a hotel because they can't afford an apartment. Yet they tour multi-million-dollar ranches, telling realtors Elizabeth will buy it for them. The mountain air will help Marjorie's youngest son, Ricky, with his asthma. The realtors are told money is no object, but it is an object. The trustees won't release funds. And Marjorie is desperate. March 1977. 3 months before the murders, the Colorado Bureau of Investigation contacts the Congdon family trustees. They've received information. Marjorie Congdon Caldwell is looking for someone to kill her mother. The trustees increase security at Glensheen, but Elizabeth refuses to believe her daughter would hurt her. She dismisses the warnings, insists Marjorie loves her. May 1977. Roger Caldwell travels to Duluth. He asks the trustees for $750,000 to buy a horse breeding ranch. He brings a letter from a doctor, forged, claiming the family needs to live on a ranch for Ricky's health. The trustees refuse. 10 days before the murders, Roger asks for $250,000 to hire attorney F. Lee Bailey to defend them against criminal charges. The couple is under investigation for insurance fraud. Marjorie is suspected of arson fires at a Colorado bank that denied her loans. Roger has bounced checks, fraudulently used credit cards. The trustees refuse again. The mathematics are simple. Marjorie and Roger need money. The money is locked in a trust Elizabeth controls. Elizabeth is 83 years old, partially paralyzed, helpless. When she dies, Marjorie inherits $8 million. 3 days before Elizabeth's death, Marjorie authorizes a notarized document. Roger will receive $2.5 million of her inheritance. It's a contract, a promise. And perhaps, as prosecutors will later argue, payment for murder. Chapter 6. The Night Everything Ends. June 26, 1977. Evening. Roger Caldwell boards a flight from Denver to Minneapolis. He's drunk. Witnesses will later testify to his condition. He takes a bus from Minneapolis to Duluth, a journey that should leave records, but police will struggle to place him definitively on any passenger manifest. He carries keys to Glensheen, Marjorie's keys, from when she lived there as Elizabeth's daughter. Late night, June 26th, into early morning, June 27th. Roger approaches Glensheen. The details of his entry are contested. Prosecutors argue he uses a rock to break a window in the billiard room, creating the appearance of forced entry, but actually enters with Marjorie's key. Defense attorneys will later suggest the crime scene is staged by others. What's not contested? Someone enters Glensheen that night. Someone moves through the darkened mansion. Someone encounters Velma Pietila on the grand staircase around 2 a.m. Velma fights. Her shoe strikes the attacker, cutting his lip, his finger, but he's stronger. He finds a brass candlestick, heavy, decorative, perfectly weighted as a weapon. He beats her, repeatedly, breaks her jaw, fractures her skull. The attack is brutal, prolonged. This is not a single blow. This is rage or determination or terror. Velma Pietila dies on the landing of the grand staircase. Blood pools around her head. The candlestick lies bent from impact. The killer walks upstairs. Elizabeth Congdon's bedroom door is open. She's asleep, paralyzed, unable to move, to speak, to defend herself. The killer takes a satin pillow, holds it over Elizabeth's face, presses down. It takes several minutes. Elizabeth suffocates. The killer must stand there, waiting, pressing, until she stops breathing. Then he searches the room, opens drawers, scatters jewelry, takes a wicker basket, fills it with valuables, a diamond and sapphire ring Elizabeth wore constantly, a watch, other pieces. A jewelry box goes missing. He goes to the bathroom, washes blood from his hands, changes clothes, leaves the suede suit bag he brought. He exits Glensheen, takes Velma Pietila's car, drives to Minneapolis-St. Paul International Airport, abandons the car in the parking lot. By morning, he's back in Colorado. June 27, 1977, 7:01 a.m. Mildred Garview arrives for her day shift as Elizabeth's nurse. The front door is unlocked. She enters. Silence. Wrong silence. She walks through the first floor, past the reception rooms, past the library. Everything looks normal until she reaches the grand staircase. Velma Pietila lies on the landing, blood. The candlestick. Mildred runs upstairs, Elizabeth's room, ransacked. Drawers open, jewelry scattered. Elizabeth in. Her bed, covers pulled up neatly. But her face? The color? The stillness. Mildred checks for a pulse. Nothing. She runs back downstairs, calls police. Within 10 minutes, Duluth Police Department arrives. The officers recognize the address immediately. Everyone in Duluth knows Glensheen. The initial theory is straightforward. Burglary gone wrong. An intruder broke in. Velma interrupted him. He killed her, then killed Elizabeth to eliminate witnesses. But the theory has problems. Why take only a small wicker basket of jewelry when the house is filled with valuable antiques, art, silver? Why use such extreme violence against Velma, then go upstairs and suffocate an elderly invalid who couldn't identify anyone? Why does the broken window in the billiard room have glass that fell outside, not inside, suggesting it was broken from within, not from outside? And most critically, who benefits from Elizabeth Congdon's death? By mid-morning, detectives are asking different questions. Within hours, they have answers. Marjorie Congdon Caldwell stands to inherit $8 million. She's broke, house foreclosed, cars repossessed, living in a hotel. She has a history of psychiatric issues. A warning from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation about murder for hire. And she's married to Roger Caldwell, unemployed, desperate, malleable. 3 days after Elizabeth's funeral, police search the Bloomington hotel room where Marjorie and Roger are staying. They find the stolen jewelry, the wicker basket, the suede suit bag, the diamond and sapphire ring Elizabeth wore when she died. Roger Caldwell is arrested first, tried in Brainerd in 1978. Prosecutor John DeSanto, just 28 years old, presents a circumstantial case built from evidence. Jewelry in the hotel room, the suede bag, a gold coin Roger mailed to himself from Duluth, blood type matches, fingerprints. The defense, led by legendary Minnesota attorney Doug Thompson, argues police planted evidence. The investigation is flawed. Roger was in Colorado. The jury convicts Roger Caldwell on 2 counts of first-degree murder, 2 life sentences. Encouraged by the conviction, prosecutors charge Marjorie with conspiracy to murder. Her trial begins in Hastings in 1979. Her attorney, Ron Meshbisher, another Minnesota legal legend, presents Marjorie as harmless. She knits at the defense table, brings a birthday cake for one of the lawyers, projects innocence. The jury deliberates 9 hours, finds Marjorie not guilty on all charges. After the trial, jurors throw a party. Invite Marjorie, 1982. The Minnesota Supreme Court overturns Roger's conviction based on new evidence from Marjorie's trial. Rather than face retrial, Roger accepts a plea bargain. Guilty to second-degree murder, time served. He's released after 5 years. He never receives the $2.5 million Marjorie promised him. 1988. Roger Caldwell commits suicide in Latrobe, Pennsylvania. A note declares his innocence in Elizabeth's murder, but DNA evidence later tested by prosecutor John DeSanto produces a 99% match for Roger Caldwell on key evidence. Marjorie, she marries Wallace Hagen in 1982 without divorcing Roger, making her a bigamist. She's convicted of arson twice, serves 12 years in prison. Wallace Hagen dies in 1992 of an overdose during a 24-hour prison furlough Marjorie receives. Marjorie claims they had a suicide pact. Authorities suspect murder but never charge her. Released in 2004, Marjorie is arrested again in 2007 for fraud. In 2008, she pleads guilty to fraudulently withdrawing funds from the bank account of Roger Samus after his death. As of the most recent reports, Marjorie lives in Tucson, Arizona. And Glensheen? It opens to the public in 1979, 2 years after the murders. Tour guides are instructed never to speak of them. Chapter 7. The Museum That Preserves Everything But Truth. Stand in the entrance hall of Glensheen today. The carved oak staircase rises before you, the same staircase where Velma Pietila died. The brass candlestick is gone, stored away, never displayed. But everything else remains. Chester Congdon's top hat in the closet, Clara's letters in desk drawers, sheets in the linen closet, folded and organized by the second-floor maid nearly a century ago. The dining room, the library with 10,000 volumes, the breakfast room with green tiles, reflecting morning light through leaded glass windows. 39 rooms, 15 fireplaces, each unique. Original furniture designed by William French to coordinate with the wood paneling in each room. Silk embroideries. Art collections, including works by American artists, Charles Warren Eaton, Henry Ferrer, Childe Hassam. The grounds, 12 acres of terraced gardens descending to Lake Superior. The original boathouse with its pier, the only private pier shown on navigational maps of the lake. The carriage house, the gardener's cottage, underground utility tunnels still in use. Glensheen receives roughly 100,000 visitors per year. They tour in groups, following audio guides, led by docents who explain the architecture, the craftsmanship, the Congdon family history. What they don't explain? The murders. Out of respect for the family, some of whom still live in the area, tour guides never speak of June 27, 1977. Never mention Marjorie. Never describe Velma's death or Elizabeth's suffocation. The official narrative is controlled. Glensheen is presented as an architectural triumph, a testament to Gilded Age craftsmanship, a time capsule of early 20th century luxury. But that narrative is incomplete. Because the real story of Glensheen is not just about beauty, it's about cost, about infrastructure, about the invisible labor that makes beauty possible, about the mathematics of maintenance, about what happens when a family fortune can no longer sustain what it created. Chester Congdon built Glensheen with mining money, iron ore extracted from the earth by workers whose names we'll never know. ore processed in mills, shipped across the Great Lakes, turned into steel that built American cities. The fortune funded a house designed to last forever, but Chester lived in it only 8 years. Clara, 34 years. Elizabeth, 27 years. The house outlived them all. And it survives not because families are permanent, but because institutions are adaptable. The University of Minnesota Duluth operates Glensheen as a historic house museum. The income from tours, events, weddings, yes, you can get married at Glensheen, funds maintenance. The university has resources no single family can match. When the roof needs replacing, there's a budget. When the gardens need tending, there are staff. The house functions not as a private residence, but as a public trust. The transformation from family home to museum saved it. But the transformation required sacrifice. Elizabeth's death. The murders that forced the family to release control. The university taking ownership. The opening of private spaces to public view. Glensheen survives because it no longer serves the purpose for which it was built. Chapter 8. The Cost Accounting. Let's add up what Glensheen really cost. Construction, 1905-1908, $854,000, equivalent to roughly $30 million today. Labor during construction, dozens of workers over 3 years, 9 months, stonemasons, carpenters, electricians, plumbers, landscapers, their wages paid from Chester's fortune. Some names survive in archives, most don't. Operational costs, 1908-1977, 70 years of heating, electrical, plumbing, staffing, maintenance. Conservative estimates suggest tens of thousands of dollars per year in the early decades, hundreds of thousands to millions in today's currency. Staff over 7 decades, up to 30 people employed at peak. Gardeners, chauffeurs, cooks, maids, butlers, housekeepers, living in the mansion, living on the grounds, living nearby, entire lives spent maintaining beauty for one family. Chester's life, 8 years in the house he built, dead at 63. Velma Piatila, born 1911, works as a nurse for decades, retires, agrees to fill in for one night shift, beaten to death at 66 years old. Elizabeth Congdon, born 1894, inherits Glensheen in 1950, lives there 27 years, the last 13 paralyzed by stroke, suffocated at 83. Roger Caldwell, convicted, released, commits suicide at 54 declaring his innocence, never receives the money he was promised. The fortune, created by Chester through investments in iron ore mining, sustained through decades by wise management, diminished by operational costs, family spending, and finally, legal fees from murder trials. The transformation from private mansion to public museum, from family refuge to tourist attraction, from shining glen to crime scene to historic landmark. The cost cannot be calculated in dollars alone. What does it cost to build paradise? The labor of workers whose names we forget. The fortune extracted from earth that does not regenerate. The decades of maintenance that never ends. What does it cost to maintain paradise? Staff who give their lives to it. Heat, electricity, water, repairs, expenses that compound yearly. The eventual recognition that no family fortune is infinite. What does it cost when paradise becomes a prison? A mother who won't release inheritance to a daughter willing to kill for it. 2 women dead in the night. A husband who confesses and then recants. A trial that captivates Minnesota. What does it cost to preserve paradise? Institutional ownership, public access, the transformation of private memory into public history, the silence around murder so tourists can admire architecture. Glensheen stands, beautiful, intact, 117 years old, but Chester Congdon, who dreamed of permanence, is gone. Clara is gone. Elizabeth is gone. Velma Piatila is gone. Roger Caldwell is gone. The house survives not because families last forever, but because we decided collectively that some beauty deserves preservation, even when the people who created it cannot maintain it. Chapter 9. What the House Remembers. Walk through Glensheen at dusk. The tour groups have left. The mansion is quiet. In Elizabeth's bedroom, the furniture stands as it did. The bed where she was suffocated. The dresser drawers that were ransacked. The window overlooking Lake Superior. On the grand staircase, the landing where Velma Piatilla died. No marker, no plaque. Just polished wood and the fading light through leaded glass. In the basement, the boiler rooms still function. Updated systems, modern technology, but the purpose unchanged, keeping the machine running. The house remembers what we choose to forget. It remembers the workers who built it, the immigrants from Europe, the laborers whose wages were fractions of the building costs, the craftsmen who carved oak and laid stone and designed furniture that still stands 117 years later. It remembers the staff who maintained it, the gardeners who tended 22 acres, the cooks who prepared thousands of meals, the maids who cleaned 39 rooms, the chauffeurs, the butlers, the housekeepers whose entire lives orbited this one building. It remembers Clara writing in her diary about her quiet neighbors in the cemetery. Chester dying far from home after only 8 years here. Elizabeth, paralyzed, helpless, murdered in the bed she'd slept in for decades. It remembers Velma Piatilla, filling in for a sick colleague, walking down a staircase in the dark. And it remembers Roger Caldwell, lost, desperate, drunk, coming to Duluth to collect on a promise of $2.5 million he'd never receive. The house remembers because we made it remember. We preserved it, opened it to tours, listed it on the National Register of Historic Places, made it a museum instead of a home. But we preserved selectively. We kept the beauty, the craftsmanship, the architecture, the furniture and art and perfectly arranged rooms. We hid the infrastructure, cleaned up the boiler rooms for special tours, but rarely show them. Never. Discuss the coal consumption, the staffing costs, the mathematical impossibility of sustaining such a place privately. And we never mention the murders, not on tours, not in official materials. The violence that ended Elizabeth and Velma's lives is considered off-limits, inappropriate, disrespectful to the family. But the murders are part of Glensheen's truth. They're the moment when the illusion of permanence shattered, when the promise of inherited wealth collided with the reality of mortality, when beauty built on extraction demanded a final, terrible payment. Glensheen is not just an architectural triumph, it's evidence. Evidence of what it costs to build beauty. Evidence of what it costs to maintain it. Evidence that permanence is always temporary. And evidence that sometimes the people who inherit paradise would rather destroy each other than share it. June 27th, 2025. 48 years after the murders. Glensheen still stands on London Road. The gardens bloom. The terraces descend to Lake Superior. The mansion rises, red brick and stone, copper-weathered green, exactly as Chester and Clara imagined it. Tourists walk through rooms preserved perfectly. They admire fireplaces and carved oak and silk embroideries. They photograph the breakfast room with its green tiles. They stand on the pier and look across the lake. They rarely think about the workers who built it, or the staff who maintained it, or the 2 women who died trying to protect and claim it. Chester Congdon built Glensheen as a refuge, a shining glen where his family could live in beauty, insulated from the industrial chaos that funded it. But refuge is illusion. Beauty requires sacrifice. And the invisible people who paid the real price, the miners, the construction workers, the household staff, the nurses, they're the ones we forget. The fortune came from iron ore. The house came from fortune. The murders came from inheritance. And the museum came from the impossibility of maintaining paradise privately. What is Glensheen really? It's a monument to extraction, iron pulled from the earth, wealth pulled from labor, beauty pulled from resources that eventually run out. It's a testament to craftsmanship, stonemasons and carpenters and landscape architects creating something extraordinary that lasts beyond their lifetimes. It's a machine, a beautiful, terrible machine that consumes coal, electricity, water, labor, money, and keeps demanding more. It's a crime scene, the place where desperation and entitlement and the mathematics of inheritance converged in violence. And it's a museum. The thing it became when one family could no longer sustain it, the transformation that saved it. Chester Congdon dreamed of permanence. He built a house designed to last forever, and it has, but only by ceasing to be what he imagined, only by becoming public instead of private, only by transforming from home to artifact. The lesson is plain. Beauty by itself is not enough. Wealth by itself, not enough. Ambition, vision, craftsmanship, none of it is enough if you cannot answer the fundamental question, who pays? Not just in money, in labor, in maintenance, in sacrifice, in lives. Glensheen cost $854,000 to build. It cost decades of staff labor to maintain. It cost Chester only 8 years of his life. It cost Clara 34 years. It cost Elizabeth 27 years, and finally her life. It cost Velma Pietola her life. And now it costs each of us, collectively, through public institutions, through ticket sales, through the decision that some beautiful things deserve preservation even when the people who created them are gone. Can beauty built on extraction survive? Yes. But not in the form it was built. Can a family fortune last forever? No, unless it transforms into something else, a trust, an institution, a museum. Can a house designed for one family serve millions? Yes, but only if the family lets it go. Chester and Clara Congdon built Glensheen between 1905 and 1908. They raised their children there. Chester died in 1916, Clara in 1950, Elizabeth in 1977. The house remains. Not because families are permanent, but because we chose to preserve it. And perhaps that's the real lesson. Not that beauty is fragile, or that wealth corrupts, or that inheritance destroys, but that the things we build outlive us only if we accept that they cannot remain ours forever. Glensheen is no longer the Congdon family's shining glen. It's Minnesota's. It's everyone's who visits. The transformation saved it. But the transformation required letting go of the dream that created it. Chester Congdon believed he was building permanence. What he actually built was a gift he didn't know he was giving. And now, every year, 100,000 people walk through that gift. They admire the craftsmanship. They photograph the beauty. They stand in rooms where 2 women died. Most never learn their names. Most never ask what it cost. Most never wonder who paid, but the house remembers. The boiler rooms still function. The gardens still bloom. The grand staircase still rises. The bedroom where Elizabeth died still has the same furniture. And somewhere in the archives, the payroll ledgers survive. Names of workers, amounts paid, records of labor that made beauty possible. Glensheen stands as monument and warning. Build beautiful things, but know what they cost. Create permanence, but accept you cannot own it forever. Extract value from earth, from labor, from fortune, but understand. Eventually, the debt comes due. How much does a shining glen cost? More than money, more than labor, more than one family can pay. It costs vision, sacrifice, adaptation, and the humility to let great things live by serving not just the family that built them, but everyone who comes after. That's the price of permanence. That's the lesson of Glensheen. That's what survives when everything else is gone.